Hello, everyone. So my name is Adalis Dow. I'm a citizen of the Kahari tribe from Clinton, North Carolina, and also program coordinator for Triangle Native American Society. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. This is actually my first Native People Native Plant Symposium. I didn't come to the last one last year, but it's an honor to be with you. And I have the pleasure of introducing our next speakers for Muscadines Restoring Grandma's Grapevine. So we'll have Larry Edwards. He is the interim manager for the Lumbee Tribe Department of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Larry has worked for the Lumbee Tribe since March 2023 and is a former agriculture education teacher and FFA advisor. He earned a bachelor's degree in agriculture education from the University of Mount Olive, as well as a master's degree from North Carolina A&T State University. Larry has taught both middle and high school agriculture in Eastern North Carolina for 9 years and has worked in agriculture for over 15 years. He was raised in both Cumberland County and Sampson County, where he remains active in both the Lumbee and Kahari tribal communities. We give it up for Larry. And then we have Mr. Kevin Melvin. He is an enrolled member of the Lumbee Tribe and is the Cultural Historic Preservation Office for the Lumbee Tribe of North Carolina. He earned his master's degree in public history from the University of North Carolina at Wilmington and his undergraduate degree in American Indian Studies and History from the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. He is a founding member of the Lumbee Stickball Association and a member of Phi Sigma Nu Fraternity Incorporated. Give it up for Larry and Kevin.
So I'll start out a little bit, I guess, my story with Muscadines. So we were at a conference a couple months ago, and Jesselyn talked to us and said, "Hey, do y'all mind doing one on Muscadines?" So a little bit of background first. As it said in my introduction, so I was an agriculture teacher for years. And most of us now in North Carolina are probably two, if not three generations now removed off the farm. But living in rural eastern North Carolina and also being in a tribal community, you just kind of grow up what we call country. You grow up putting up corn, picking peas and putting up peas every year, peas and snaps. Grandma said, don't forget my snaps. Um, and then, of course, a big part of that was wild foraging, like muscadines. So we called them, and a lot of people do call them possum grapes. They were just wild grapes that you found out in the woods. And then you go out, and I remember when I was young, my uncle was a painter. So he had a tall van. So Mama would always make me stand up on top of the van. And she said, now shake them trees real hard. And all the grapes would come down, and you collect them. So ever since I was really little, I remember of just not even cultivated grapes, but just foraging wild grapes. That's something that's still super popular in North Carolina. And then we'll get a little bit more into the actual cultivation of muscadines and how that came about and how North Carolina is really famous for that. Kevin?
Can y'all hear me? This thing works? Okay. So my background, my story on grapevines. I remember when I was small. Hard to believe, but at one point I was small. Um, my grandpa, he had a huge grapevine in his yard. Actually, before that, going back a little bit further back than that, my grandmother was the one that actually planted the grapevine. When she passed away in the 80s, Grandpa kind of kept it up in memory of her. But every year, that was my job as a small kid was to go up under that grapevine, and the grapes that he couldn't get to from the outside, my job was to get up under there and pick those grapes on the inside. And he would always tell me, watch out for he called it mama. So it was a snake that lived in the grapevine. I don't know what kind of snake it was, but as a small kid, I'm terrified. I'm picking these grapes and I'm looking for a snake somewhere or another. I never seen the snake, but he was always telling me, watch out for mama. So, but growing up, once I got big enough and everything, he would take me out and show me how to prune and show me how to take care of the grapevine and that sort of thing. So even to the day on our family farm, we have a grapevine, and that's something that I get out there and I run my children, my girls up under there, pick them grapes up under there, and then as soon as they get big enough, they'll learn how to prune just like I did. So we're passing this information down. So, yeah.
And I had inherited my grandmother's house 2, 3 years ago now, and of course, she has her grapevines. Mamaw didn't exist. He did that to make you get
Yeah.
them grapes faster. By
Get
the way,
them fast.
so you tell your girls about Mamaw. Okay. All right, so Muscadine origins. So, and I'm glad that somebody had brought it up. So Miss Darlene actually brought it up a while ago. So, Muscadine origins is the mother vine. I don't know how many of you heard of that before, but it actually exists on the island, on Roanoke Island, which is in Manio. So, located at the northern end of Roanoke Island, the mother vine and its grapes have been along or have been found by Philip Amatus and Arthur Barlow, which were spotted in 1584 during the American expedition, which was sponsored by Sir Walter Raleigh. I actually was just there this past weekend, and I've had the chance to actually go and tour the property where this is at. It is at somebody's private home site, so you can't just show up. It is respectful to call beforehand, but the people were very welcoming, and we actually got to go and tour, and it is huge. It is on a trellis that's about this high up, and it is. I think they said that they had it measured, and I think the vine now is over. I think they said around like 2 miles. I think between us in there, and I know the base of it is certain parts is up to 2 feet at some of the base. And when I was doing my research on this, some of the traditions that they were talking about. So, of course, they wrote about it first in 1584. But then, of course, when they started speaking to the natives that were there that was cultivating this vine, they had heard from their grandparents of how old that vine was. So that lets you know that that vine easily was into the 1400s and had been there. This is what they believe to be the oldest muscadine vine in the world. And muscadines are native to North Carolina, and then we'll get into actually another variety of muscadines in a minute, and we'll talk about scuppernongs. So when the two saw this cultivated by natives, that was probably everybody heard the story of the lost colony. So those were probably the Croatan Indians that had been there to cultivate that. Was probably a wild vine that they began to prune, and they began to take care of that vine to again to let it produce. Actually 400-year old. The mother vine is a variety of scuppernongs, which is your grapes that look more bronze or yellow color is your scuppernong. And that was the first Native American grape to be cultivated in North Carolina. Anything on that?
Mm-mm.
Okay. And so these are a couple of the pictures from that vine, and you can see how wide the base is of those vines, and you can see the trellis, and you can see now how they keep it, pretty high up off the ground to be able to maintain. And also for that, it allows your fruit to be able to drop down up under that, but the top get plenty of sunlight. So muscadines. So they're native only to southeastern and southern United States. Muscadines thrive in warm, humid climates. So they are very prevalent in the southeast and the southern part of the United States. Wild muscadine vines are found growing in for as high up as southern Delaware, southward along the Atlantic coast, northern Florida, and then westward of Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas. And because muscadines are a native plant, they are particularly immune to fungus, disease, bacteria, especially plant pests, compared to European varieties. So those varieties that they have, especially in California, that they make a lot of wines out of, those are very susceptible to diseases. So one thing that we don't have to worry about as much here in North Carolina when we're pruning, Courtney spoke a little bit earlier about PPE and things like that, and maintaining tools. You don't really have to do that as much because these grapevines, being they're native to here, are actually very immune to diseases. So whenever you're doing a lot of pruning, a lot of times you also want to carry a little bit of bleach water or something like that to disinfect tools. And oftentimes, I don't know if I've ever seen my grandma wash a pair of shears off. I don't think she ever have. Matter of fact, she kept the flavor on them. That's what made them cut better. But but because it's a native plant, you have that resistance. And then I think I'll talk about it a little bit later on. But then when it comes to pests as well, for those of you who have eaten muscadines and scuppernongs, the skins on those are a bit tougher. They're a little bit harder than a regular table grape. And because of that, they are often resistant to pests because it's hard for them to chew into. So if you can keep the raccoons and possums and stuff out of them, then you might be out in the deer. Yeah, you might be all right. So scuppernongs grow best in fertile, sandy, loamy soil that's well drained, which sounds exactly like North Carolina soils for those of y'all who know. Bottomlands where they're subjected to neither extensive drought nor waterlogging. So there's difference between scuppernongs and muscadines. So I put up here all scuppernongs are muscadines, but not all muscadines are scuppernongs. So scuppernong is a variety of muscadine grape. And again, those are going to be your more yellow, bronze grape, and then your dark purple and black grapes are your muscadines. So some of the characteristics of those, so of course your muscadine are going to be purple to black in color. They do have a tougher skin. They are a bit sweeter. They have a lot more juice in them. As far as scientifically, they do have male and female parts. So one plant can flower and pollinate itself to be able to germinate, to be able to produce fruit. They do have a larger fruit size. So then your scuppernongs, on the other hand, again, light green to bronze color. They ripen into late summer to early fall. They have a milder taste. They have less acidic acid, and they are female plants only. So that means that they will flower, but they need another male vine to then pollinate that. So that's the difference between the two. So if you have a scuppernong vine, they will have to be another vine, another scuppernong plant, male plant, within about 25 feet. And then really as far as pollination goes, wind does a really good job. And then again,
Bees.
your deer and your bees and your raccoons, your birds that'll nest inside of there. Oftentimes, about every year when I go to cut mine back, there'll be some type of bird nest in there, something like that. All of those will help to germinate and pollinate those plants. And again, those scuppernong variety especially are very indicative of North Carolina. So some of the usage of muscadine grapes, of course, they're eaten fresh. They can make wine, juice, jellies, pies, preserves. Hopefully, we'll have a little bit of time. We'll get to talk about grape dumplings. And then I put up there also possum grapes, because again, me growing up, my mom and my grandparents taught me how to forage for those wild plants. So it wasn't always, especially for muscadines, that was always something that was out in the woods that was just kind of readily available. Like Miss Darlene, I spend a lot of time playing in the woods, beating sticks of trees and everything else. So you'd find them out there. So one of another key important aspect of grapes are the health benefits that you get from grapes. So they're rich in antioxidants, they're high in fiber, cardiovascular health. So they have the same chemical properties of why they tell you that wine is good for you. As they say, to drink 4 ounces of wine is good for cardiovascular health, and heart health is still the same thing. It boosts immune system, cancer prevention, skin care, anti-inflammatory. And one thing that I had up here highlighted was scurvy, which when the first European settlers came over here, one thing that was very prominent through European settlers was a disease called scurvy. And what that is an extreme vitamin C deficiency, because we had things like pine needle tea. Again, we were in pine savannas, and we had fruits like grapes that were very hardy for us. We had a source of vitamin C, so we didn't catch scurvy. And what that does, that was very bad. It caused tooth decay, very bad mouth, skin blemishes, really bad, just very
You could
lethargic.
die from it too.
Yeah, and in worst cases, you could die from it. Well, I mean, that's just a little,
Worst
little
case.
side effects. Um, say that again.
From
No,
scurvy.
from scurvy. No, not from the grapes. Not from the grapes. Just don't get them mixed up with pokeberries, and then you'll be fine.
Yeah.
But so now we'll start to get into some of the vine management part of that, and this is where I'll start to kind of hand it over to Kevin a little bit. But pruning grapes are essential to the vine management of that, and it doesn't just have to be a vineyard. Most of us probably don't have a vineyard. We just got an old grapevine in the yard, and that's what most of us have. And it's on an old fence line, or sometimes it'll take over your clothesline if you let it. It'll get in whatever. I promise. I got a chain link fence. I can't cut it enough. So it ensures healthy growth, improve grape quality and quantity of those grapes. And then, of course, it maintains the shape. One good thing that often, if any of you have seen, you could train grapes to about do what you want to do. So as they start to vine through, I've seen people use it as privacy fences, and I've seen them make trellises out of it. And like I say, again, you can start to train those to be able to make them do what you want. Again, muscadines are native and are often resilient to many diseases, pests, and funguses. And one of the big things, don't be shy about pruning. I read some of the articles that said even up to 90%. They were saying that you could prune back for the following year because they are very fast growing, especially muscadines. They are very fast growing. And so to get a healthier plant, to get more quality and more quantity off of those, you want to be very heavy in pruning those. Um, when I was down in Manio just last weekend, actually, they have already started pruning back a lot of um, their grapevines, but that's because they're a bit more northern. They'll get a bit more colder earlier than what we do. And so actually I'll show one of the little Christmas ornaments we made up there, and it came from some of the cuttings from Mother Vine. Um, I have tried to get cuttings from it before. I had 4 good friends of ours. We got cuttings from it, tried to put it in a greenhouse and everything, and we could not. So I reckon the creator did not want us to have a piece of that vine. Um, but now it's become super marketable for any of y'all that are wine drinkers. I know Duplin Brothers has a version of Mother Vine wine. There's been others that have paid to get cultivars from that. Um, so especially in southern United States, that has become a very popular wine for the simple fact that unlike other table wines, European, especially California wines, they can be a bit more bitter, not have as much taste, to where muscadines always have a much sweeter, richer flavor. And then these are a couple of the hand tools that you would use. Of course, a basic pair of cutting shears. You do want some gloves. I have some lopping shears, and if it gets too out of hand, I think I seen Micaiah's last year. You probably needed some electric shears. So, and mine's borderline in needing it. So, then parts of the grapevine, I will briefly go over this. The 2 big things that I wanted to really point out with these 2 that really cause issues whenever you have grapevines is if you look at the bottom of that graph, you'll see the suckers on there and then the water sprouts. You always want to make sure you trim those back because that's when you end up having an unruly grapevine. And that's how you again start to cultivate and train that grapevine is by getting rid of those suckers and water sprouts. And suckers are just like how many in here grew up on a tobacco farm or messing with tobacco? You do the same things. You got to go and break those suckers off to keep them from growing. It's the same thing, and they will again grow back very fast. So with pruning grapes, so you want to prune grapevines in the late winter to early spring. So again, for us now in North Carolina, that's what about March, probably
I
February,
usually I
March.
usually do mine around the first of the year,
Yeah.
January, February.
Prune away any damaged or weak vines, anything that looks like it may have started to rot away. You want to prune all of that back. Any vines that are crossing over, again, because you want to start to be able to manage that, to be able to make it what you want it. So again, if you have it on a fence line, if you have it on a trellis, like I say, again, you want to start being able to do that. Prune the spurs within 6 to 8 inches. We'll explain a little bit what that is. And then you want to prune away at the base of the main trunk. Again, those suckers or those water sprouts that come out. What I suggest with those most of the time, actually, if you cut those back, replant them somewhere else that you'll have them. Because again, they do really well, and they will take roots from the nodes on here, and they'll do just fine.
Hey guys, I hope that whenever and wherever this finds you, it finds you doing well. I get a lot of questions about the proper way to prune muscadine grapevines. And so I thought I'd do a quick video to show you the technique that I use to make sure that we have a lot of grapes, muscadine grapes this coming summer. Pruning is super important. As you can see, muscadines are generally vigorous growers, and if you do not prune these back, not only will they kind of get out of control as far as the shape and size of them, but also proper pruning affects not only the quantity of grapes that you'll get in the summer, but the quality of grapes as far as size and sweetness and things like that as well. And so what I'm going to do is kind of go through and show you some of the steps and things that I look for and things that I do, and I hope that this will help you in some way in getting started in pruning your muscadine grapevines. Now let me say this, I normally wait until around Valentine's Day to do my pruning. Some people do it a little earlier, but most of the experts that I've read do theirs in February, even up to early March. It's about a week or so later than I wanted to do this, but we've had a lot of rain, and this is the first nice weather day that I was able to get out here and do that. So let's get started, and I'm going to show you some of the parts of the grapevine, and so when I use the terminology of certain things, you'll understand what it is that I mean by that. Now the first thing that I do is I'm going to start here on the main trunk, and I am going to come through and cut all of these off. I don't want anything, no canes or anything coming out of the trunk. I try to keep all that trimmed off. Okay, so that's the first thing that I'm going to do, and then I'm going to come in through.
Pretty loud, but I'll grab that. But so what he means by the canes is if you look right over here at this vine that I have, so as you can tell, this came off of my grapevine and it is in bad need of being pruning. But the canes are these shoots that are coming up from over here. And actually this right here come up from a main, from one of the main roots from that, or the main stem from that. But these are what he's talking about. And those are what you want to definitely make sure that you trim off when doing this. Actually, this is a local farmer. I don't know if any of the Cohary members know this farmer, but he's there in Clement. So he actually comes out of Sampson County, and I've met him several times before.
Here, and I'll show you how we're going to get our spurs off of these canes. Now, as you can see, I use what's called a single curtain system. You know, you can run one trellis wire at the top. Some people will have another one and do a double curtain. I always just go simply with the one. That way I can still get my lawnmower under there, and it's easier to cut. And plus, these vines can only support so many grapes. And so I still get more grapes than we can even use using this system. So this is just what works for us. Now, you know, all of your muscadines has a main trunk that comes up out of the ground, and then you have these, some people call them runners. Technical name is called a cordon, that runs along your trellis wire. So this is like your main arm that you have that goes from out of the trunk. Okay, now these the things that we see here from the last year's growth is called canes, and you can actually look and see by the coloring. I hope it shows up good on the camera. See how brown this is? This is last year's growth, but this is some old growth from a couple of years ago. Okay, and so you'll hear me talking about old growth versus last year's growth. And so anytime I say a bud or a node, I'm actually talking about these little bumps that you see here on the side of the stem, okay? And so I just wanted to show you some of, the terms that I use when talking about the parts here of the grapevine. Now, I have a little bucket here. I've put some Clorox solution. I take my pruning shears and soak them in that to make sure I've killed any germs or anything beforehand, so I don't want to spread. And usually between each vine, I'll put them in there and swish them around and help sanitize them, just so I'm not transferring, anything bad from one plant to another, okay?
And I don't know how that color is showing up on there, but what he was speaking about on there, which you could tell the difference between new growth and then old growth, what will end up happening is on that stem, old growth will start to almost have like a grayish looking color on there. Is actually the stems will start to turn almost a gray color, where your newer growth will actually be a brown color on there. So you can tell, and I have some different cuttings over here where you can actually see the difference in color of what was newer growth from last year and then what was older growth. So that's how you can always tell what needs to be cut back, as well as whenever your leaves die off and then you get ready to prune, and then you could look at the color of those stems and those canes to be able to tell what is old and what's new. And again, especially if it gets that grayish tint, that's older growth. You want to get rid of that. That wants to be first and foremost. Even if you don't get a full prune off and get a full prune, say you run out of time, you just don't have the patience for it, because sometimes it could be daunting, especially if you have a vine that has taken over and you're trying to get one back in order again. It could be a lot, especially if you have multiple ones. I see a couple people shaking their head because they know it could be a lot to be able to do. But again, to be able to start to get that back in order, whenever you're looking, again, use what you know to be able to do that. So again, if can tell the difference between what is old growth and what's new growth, then you can start to be able to help you cut that back to be able to make the difference whenever you're wanting to get that back in order.
I went ahead and thinned this out just a little bit, just so I could show you a little better some of the things I do. One thing is once one vine ends and it starts going into the other vines, I just clip these off, and so I'm basically just clipping the ends at the end of my post. All right, and so, but one thing I wanted to point out, if you notice that these are the growths that we had from last year, previous year, and then again you have the brown stem from last year's growth. Sometimes these little spurs get too crowded in here, so you see these gray older spurs here, and you like to have them spaced out. I've read about a hand's width apart. See how we have one here and I cut that one, we have one here and I cut that one. So what I'm going to do is I go in here and I pick out one of these and just snip that out. And I'm going to take out that one so that I only have one there. And then what I do is on these last year's canes, and this is what I do all up and down the vine, is I put one or two buds past last year's growth. So whenever the cane gets brown from where it was gray, I just go down two buds, and that's where the flowers will be that will make my new grapes for this year. Okay, so you want to thin out this older gray growth to where you have like one hand width a piece, but on those new growths from that, you want to leave one or two buds for each of those spurs. Okay, and again, I wanted to give you a close-up look of what I was talking about as far as here's our old growth, there's the new growth, and you can see these little bumps on the side of the stem. Those are called nodes. And so what I'm going to do is come through here, and I'm just going to leave one or two of those and snip it off. And so this right here, last year's growth, this is where my flowers will be, and this obviously will be where my fruit's at. And so that's what I'm talking about as far as leaving a little spur there of a 1 to 2 node off of the main canes. All right, I wanted to give you just a little look at what the grapevines look like once I get done pruning. And again, all I did is come back and go through and take these spurs and just leave a few, one or two nodes of the new growth on it. I might actually go in there a little bit later and thin some of these out just a little bit more.
One thing that I wanted to point out as well, where he's talking about the spurs on there, is where you have those small stems he has growing out of there. And what you want to make sure is whenever you're pruning those, what'll happen is oftentimes those will start to over time can kind of bunch up and you'll have 3 and 4 spurs on one little patch. And so what you want to do is it'll overcrowd itself. And then what ends up happening is it overcompensates or it'll have competition. So what you want to do is to make sure that you have enough space for your fruit and flowers to grow. You want to take some of those out. You don't never, because what'll happen is it will actually kind of become a ball right there in that area. And so as you start to prune through that, you want to make sure you take those off. So one thing that I want to point out on this one, as you can tell, and these aren't too bad as far as clumped together. They some of these are hand width apart, some of them are a little more, so that's not too bad. But one of the big things behind that is you heard him say that you want to go 2 nodes above that. So you have one bump here, that node, you have another one here. So you want to cut that about right here. And same thing on each one of those. And again, you don't have to be precise, but again, what you want to do, again, the more growth that you cut off of this, the more will grow back. And that's always the case with grapes. So actually we have a piece here.
So like you were saying, I'll walk out here so everybody can kind of sort of see it a little bit better. So just imagine that you have this main piece right here that's running on your wire, right? That's hanging off. All right. So when you come in, what I normally do, I got big hands, so it just depends. But I'll put my hand in here and say, okay, what do I have? And then that's another good spacing. That one's pretty good. Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. All right. So again, like I said, hand spacing. Now, from here back's pretty good, but right here it gets crowded. You see what I'm saying? You got multiple in here. So I'll come in. That's a pretty good hand spacing there, but now I got this one here, so I'll cut this one here off. Just completely take it off. And then another hand spacing, just completely take this one off. All right, and I'll do that. I'll work my way down the vine, and I'll do the whole thing just like that, right? So then once I get all that done, then I'll come back. And like you said, these little nodes off the ones that I left, I count 2 or 3. I normally about 2, and then I'll cut it off just past that. You got 1, 2, just a little bit past that. Now all this stuff right here, this extra stuff, clean it off. You just want to clean it up as best you can. These ain't pretty good, but clean it up the best you can and everything. And like I said, when you get done with the vine, you're going to step back and look at it, and you're going to say, I jacked that up. I cut too much off. I'm completely killed my vine. Trust me, you did not. You can't take off. I mean, if you just follow, like I said, just basic hand. Put my hand here. If I got any in between there, cut them off. And then what's left, you just find your 2 little nodes or whatever and go past the second one, cut that one off. If you do that, just basic, you'll find. Now, if you got, like you said, if you got a vine that's very overgrown, unruly, that sort of thing, and you and come in with electric shears, I've even taken a chainsaw. If it's bad enough, take a chainsaw and just start cutting, just start hacking. And like I said, at the end of it, you're going to think, well, man, I'm just messed up this vine. This ain't going to grow back. It's going to die. 9 times out of 10, it will come back. All right. And you you ain't going to damage it. But like I said, just come in. Like I said, if this is, so let's turn this upside down now. So now this is on your vine. This is what's hanging down. Just imagine if your line is about chest high, some of these things will touch the ground. And there'll be so many of them down here that you can't even see through it. So you just take your shears, your electric shears or whatever, or chainsaw, and just come in here and just cut them off, right? And then that'll kind of give you a better idea. You can look in there and see what you got.
Especially if it's my chest height.
Well, yeah. So, and again, what he was talking about on the video, the way he has that the vine strung there and everything, just that one wire coming up, running straight across. Some people will do it that way. Some will have multiple wires. Some will have it where the trellis, it come up and then trellis out to what the mother vine looks like, that sort of thing. There's a couple different ways you can do it. What's typical that you see nowadays is the one wire, kind of indicative of what like the vineyards, the wineries and stuff like that do. But it makes it easier to cut the grass up under it and keep everything cut up under it and stuff. The 2-wire, that'll give you a little bit more grape. You got more vine. That'll give you a little bit more grapes on there. But in my what I've noticed, so like on this one here, so where that first water spout comes up, then you would just put in another line down up under that one. What ends up happening is, over time, your post can only hold so much weight. Now, in the wintertime, this ain't got much weight to it when you prune it back. But in the summer, when it's got leaves on it, when it's loaded down with grapes, it's very heavy. And your posts are starting to pull in, or they'll break, or that sort of thing. So now you got to go in and cut everything back, redo your posts, redo your lines, all that stuff, and pretty much you're having to start from scratch, start over again. So I think it's better just to do the 1 wire, in my opinion. But some people say they like to doing the 2, that sort of thing, but it's just all on preference. But like I said, if you got all this stuff hanging down and it'll hang all the way to the ground, I've seen some of them so bad it hangs on the ground and runs out about 10, 12 feet out from the vine. And like I said, then you got to come in with a chainsaw and just hack everything down. As long as you don't hit this main piece that's running on that wire, you'll fine. And like I said, once you get everything cut down to where you can see what's going on, see inside there and stuff, then you start going in and you do your 2 nodes. You get your hand spacing and just do your 2 nodes and cut it back, you'll find. Now, another thing, after you cut this, depending on the time of the year when you cut it. So the guy on the video said he likes to cut his around Valentine's. It all depends off the temperature. If you're having a very cold fall, like we've had some cold temperatures this fall and everything, you can get away with pruning it back a little bit early. If you're having a warmer fall, a warmer winter, you want to wait a little bit. What it end up happening is, once you cut this, and I don't see it doing it just yet, but it'll start, I call it, it'll start peeing. So you'll have little drips of moisture, of water, will start coming out of these. Now, what ends up happening is, if the temperature ain't just right and all of a sudden you have a freeze and that water freezes, that moisture freezes inside there, it's going to kill all them nodes.
I was going to say one thing that, and I heard somebody say, oh, well, you could do it in late fall and late fall. And I would not do that, because what ended up happening is, much like us, is if you start to prune too early, what'll happen is, just like what ends up happening with our other fruiting trees, that's going to stimulate new growth on that immediately. And then what'll happen is it'll start to get new growth when then that freeze comes in that you weren't expecting, and then it kills it. And that's what he's saying, that whenever that sap starts to come out of there, then if it's doing it too much and we get a hard freeze on that, it'll kill the end of that. And so you want to make sure the timing of that. I thought the same thing when I was there this weekend, and I seen they were already cutting vines. And I was like, I wouldn't do that. Same thing when people try to plant too early in the springtime. They'll plant too early, and then you end up having the late frost come in about April, and then it'll mess all your plants up. So you just want to make sure that the timeliness of when you do that. We'll take questions right here at the end. Yeah, I did save time for that.
But real quick, I wanted to kind of go over. So he was talking about calling them possum grapes. So there's a little story behind the reason why a lot of people call them possum grapes. So if you go back in traditional native storytelling lore sort of thing, the animals and the plants, they tell us things, right? And how to be, and they kind of. So one of the stories is possum didn't always have a smooth, slick tail. At one point, the possum's tail was bushy, just like a raccoon, right? So possum loves grapes. That's one of its favorite meals, right? Favorite things to eat from possum. So these grapevines, they're growing low to the ground where the possum can get to them. Well, back in the day, the plants and the animals could talk just like humans can today. Well, they still can if you know how to listen to them. But so the possum and the grape got into an argument, and the grape says, "Okay, well, I'll fix you. I'll grow high up into the branches where you can't get to." So the possum started climbing the tree to try to get to the grapes. Well, as it's climbing the tree and everything, its hands is hanging onto the tree. It can't reach out to grab the grapes. So after a little while, the possum starts to starve because it's not eating. It can't eat anything. It's not able to eat its favorite food. In the process of going through a transformation, the possum, he starts just pulling out his hair, just pulling the hair off his body and stuff. And he's got a big, bushy, beautiful tail. And, that's one of the first things he starts pulling, just ripping the hair off of. And then eventually, now the hair is completely gone off its tail. And the possum has an idea, well, maybe if I can train my tail to curl and I can hang, and that'll free my hands and I can get the grapes and stuff. So that's one, how the muscadines, the grapes started growing up into the trees. And then two, that's how possum lost the hair off its tail. So that's kind of a cool story about that, but yeah.
I know a lot of people, whenever they prune their grapevines, they end up putting it in a big old pile and they burn it. I would always encourage people to get into crafting. Again, there's other usages behind just what you take in your body of what you do with your hands that is being connected with the environment that we are. When we're talking about conservation networks and we're talking about what we do as tribes and as people, is having that connectedness. Again, the Creator gave us everything we needed to be able to do that.
Pass it around so you can see it.
So these are a couple pictures that I had come up with. So again, grapevine wreaths, they last forever, and I don't know if anybody has bought one lately. They are expensive, so we use them for baskets. We use them for cordage. Where's that one at? Did it get passed around?
Yeah, the one.
So yeah, so I know this past weekend I was in Manio, and they transformed the whole city into Christmas vomit. No. But one of the little farms that they had, again, you can see right back over here, they were taking grapevines and they were making them into little Christmas ornaments and stuff like that. So again, I always encourage people to use your resources to be crafty. Again, get involved with things like that. And again, we would have, as Native people, we would have used that as cordage. And then you see up there in the top left, we would have made fish baskets or fish traps out of those same out of that same cordage. After we were pruning and cutting back, we would have used that. We'd have seen that as a tool and something to be able to use. We have enough time? No, we don't.
I'll just talk about it real quick.
Yeah.
So grape dumplings. All right. All the lumbies in here, raise your hand. All right.
But coherence could probably raise their hand on that one too.
Grape ice cream. Anybody in here love grape ice cream? Homecoming grape ice cream. All right. So one of the things a lot of people, our people during homecoming, during our summer ceremonies and stuff, grape ice cream is a big thing. Just getting grape ice cream. They don't sell it everywhere. It's any time of the year, any other time of the year, you cannot get grape ice cream anywhere. It's got so big now that the Pembroke McDonald's has great milkshakes. We've influenced something big. But anyway, so we have a lot of people wondering, where does this grape ice cream obsession come from? Well, it comes from grape dumplings. So traditionally, our people would have took grapes, and they would have got the whole out of them, the center out of them, and made jellies and stuff like that. But they also would have canned the hulls, the outside. And during the fall, the winter, that sort of thing, you would have made grape dumplings. So it's like you make a pretty much like it's kind of like a cobbler. It's real runny kind of feeling, and then you take pastry, dough, whatever, and you put on top of it, and it's kind of like the pie crust or whatever on top of a cobbler, right? So that was also a big thing during the summertime. You got these grape hulls that's been canned all fall and winter and everything. Well, I've been talking to a couple of elders, and every one of them pretty much tells me that during the summertime, when the ladies would make these grape dumplings, the kids, just the kids, now the adults didn't really care too much for it, but just the kids, they would put a scoop of vanilla ice cream on top of it. So it's kind of like you eating grape, like I said, cobbler a la mode with vanilla ice cream on top of it. Well, if you have any small children, like I do, you give them a bowl of ice cream, the first thing they're going to do is just going to start staring at it, right? And it's mixing all that stuff together. Well, that vanilla ice cream then turns into grape ice cream. So as small kids, that's what, we raised up. That was a delicacy. That was something to look forward to during the summertime and homecoming, was those grape dumplings with that vanilla ice cream on top of it. You stare it together. Well, then when Mayola started coming out with these different flavors, somebody in their infinite wisdom says, hey, we got a grape flavor that kind of sort of tastes like the grape ice cream that we make when we put on these dumplings and stuff. Now, the interesting thing about this is grape dumplings, it's not a unique Lumbee thing. It's pretty much tribes all across the Southeast make grape dumplings. When tribes were sent out to Oklahoma after the 1830s, Oklahoma, you cannot grow muscadine grapes in Oklahoma. The climate is different so much that you can't grow muscadine grapes in Oklahoma. Maybe like the southern, southeastern parts of Oklahoma, maybe, but in a lot of those other places you cannot. So those communities, those peoples that were removed out there, they still had this yearning for this dish. So they started using table grapes. Mm-hmm. It doesn't taste the same. Now they've started using Welch's grape juice. Again, it does not taste the same. So we recently, a couple years ago, we had some leadership from the Chickasaw Nation come here to visit the Lumbee, and we were kind of spitballing ideas about what kind of gift to give these people that's coming here. In Native societies, when you meet with somebody for the first time, or when you have dignitaries come in, you always have a gift exchange. So everybody's, let's give them an eagle feather, let's give them a hand drum, let's give them all this other, pan-Indian, in my opinion, BS.
They wanted grapes.
So my idea was, hey, the grapes are coming off at the house. So I went home and I picked a whole gallon bag of muscadine grapes. And I brought it in and I gave it to this guy, and he started crying. And he's like, we cannot get muscadine grapes at home. So my idea, one of the things that we've been talking about, we got the culture center, we got land, we got places that we can grow grapevines. How can we not, make this connection between us and the tribes out in Oklahoma, supply them with muscadine grapes? You know what I'm saying? That's a connection that they don't have anymore. So that's something that's pretty cool. Yeah.
Especially with those tribes that a lot of people lose the fact those are Siouan speaking people.
Yep, in a lot of cases.
Yep, in a lot of cases. Here, I know I had a couple hands raised. We'll take a couple questions if anybody had questions.
One quick question. You were talking about cutting back grapevines, and I was wondering, would it be, we just had our first freeze, so I guess I kind of answered my own question, because I was going to ask, would it be okay to cut your grapevine back after the first freeze?
I would wait. I would still wait. You figure it's mid-December now. I'd wait until like the first of the year, just to be on the safe side. Yeah.
Because it hadn't, what will happen is, even though we've had that first freeze, it hadn't hardened off enough to where it wouldn't probably hurt it. Even if you were to cut it at this point, it's still going to want to start springing new growth. Even with that, because for instance, the weather yesterday was 60 degrees, close to 60 degrees. So we're still going to have those days in between here and there that's going to want to spark that. Plants are going to do what plants do. And if you give them that, they're going to want to try to do it. So.
Real quick, you got your cord down, and then you're making your canes hand width apart. I just want to be clear, your canes, are they all brown? Or do you have a few that are the older gray?
So your main runner that comes through there, that arm that he was speaking about, that is your older growth. That's what you want to keep. So that's probably going to be a grayer color. And so your new growth that comes out is going to be what's brown or what you need to cut back. Again, this would say if this right here was that main arm, that main runner, this is what's hand length apart. This is what you want to cut off.
Yeah. And so what's going to happen is over time, so I cut this year. Well, next year when I come around and I'm pruning again, now these nodes are going to send out more of these. They may be an arm's length, they may be a couple of feet, that sort of thing, but they're going to send off runners. So depending on what you want to do, so if you want to extend your grapevine out anymore, like the very last one, you just kind of bend it down a little bit, and now you just extend it out some more. But all these in the middle, you're cutting out. So this year is brown. Next year it may be gray, just depending.
But it doesn't mean you have to cut it.
It doesn't mean you have to cut it. I would come back in, and if you want to keep these few right here, say, you know, cut this one here off. If you want to keep these next year, you just come back and cut them to the same spot that they're at right now. Okay. And they'll shoot off again. But eventually what's going to happen is roughly about the size of my thumb. I don't like to take a ruler into the farm. I'm using my body parts, you know, sort of thing. So about the size of my thumb. Once this gets to about the size of my thumb, its lifespan at that point, it's like, okay, well, it's giving you all it's going to give you.
And that's what creates those spurs that he was talking about, that it'll kind of each year, another one will come out from here, even though you cut it. And that's what creates those spurs. So now eventually, maybe 2-3 years from now, you may have to come back really and get it back to this point, but you can each year kind of come back in that same spot.
So if you flip it over, now you got another node right here. That's going to produce again. So next year, if I want to get rid of this one and just leave this one. So now, and it also too, another thing, so like I said, if this is going straight up, you don't necessarily want all these here going down to the ground. Because like I said, it's going to go down in the ground. You're going to lose a lot of grapes and stuff. So the ones that are coming up, you leave those. Maybe some that are going off to the sides, you kind of leave those. Anything that's going straight down, I normally just cut that off. But like I said, you know, next year you'll have this one coming off here. Maybe you can kind of train it to turn and move out. That's the cool thing about these. You can train them to do anything. You can train them to grow completely like this. And as long as you keep it trained, it's going to grow just like this. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah.
I too live in the country. And I'm feeding lots of possums in my woods. But I'm not a possum.
Can I go and, can I pull a water spout off and bring that in my yard?
Oh, absolutely.
You
Yes.
can? Okay.
Yes, absolutely. And in the same way, that's how cultivation began with any plant. We've seen it in the wild, we got it, and then cultivation just mean that now we have control of it. So that's what cultivation is. We found the first grapevine and we started training it. So you could do that with any type of plant out there.
Could I just leave it in the woods and train it there?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
As long as it's your wood.
I would not do that.
Or at least make sure it's TNC's woods. They'll let you in there to it.
So I was lucky enough to get to plant all kinds of different plants where I work at a nature preserve. We're really focusing on native plants. So we were really excited about muscadines growing along a fence line, and they're really little. They just finished their first growing season. Should I prune them this year?
I would wait.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would wait, especially in your first season. I would wait, and I didn't get into it. Muscadines are not a big fertilizer needing plant. I wouldn't, especially not at the base of it, because anybody who knows how nitrogen can burn it, especially when it's young like that. So a basic 10-10-10, just kind of sporadically right there at the base. I didn't speak about it because really grapes aren't one that they need a lot of fertilization. They really do a really good job of just taking care of themselves. No more questions. No, I'm just playing.
This is a good one. Do you know the story on how Scuppernong became our state
fruit?
Yeah.
Yeah, do you share?
So I was in the 3rd grade in 2001, and it was a North Carolina project to name one, and I think it was Dare County, where the Scuppernong River is and all that. What won the competition, and in '01 or '02, that's when the General Assembly adopted the Scuppernong.
Oh wow!
From what I remember as a young, I guess.
I knew it was named after the river because that's what splits Tyrell and Dare County
That
up
northeast,
there in
yeah.
that northeast part. And I knew
Washington,
that's
maybe.
where it got its name, but I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Real quick, how long do you let the cordons run? Is there an optimal length?
I normally, in mine, really depends on you. If you want a real long one, you can let it run real long. But I normally kind of keep mine roughly about 30 feet. Again, you got to figure it's taking the nutrients out of the ground here. And if now you're having to run those nutrients 30 feet, 20, 30 feet either direction, by the time it gets to the very tip, you've lost a lot of nutrients. So your grapes out here on the end is going to be real small, or they're not going to mature.
Especially if it's something that you don't want to have to manage a lot, because again, muscadines do a really good job of taking care of themselves, but once you start, really stretching out capacity, then you have to step into that.
And so does that same situation hold true with respect to the number of cordons that you keep? Or
Not as much, because again, as long as you're doing a good job as pruning, and kind of keeping it close to that main arm, you're normally pretty good.
Because see, with grapes, that's kind of rule of thumb that I've always went by. Because with grapes, the thing is with grapes, where your grapes are growing is on, the grapes always grow on this year's growth.
Yep.
So if you cut it back to these two nodes is going to send off more shoots, right, in this year. Well, that's two nodes that you got grapes growing on. If you go 3, now you got 3. If you go 4, now you got 4. It all depends on what your capacity is.
And over time, what'll happen is that's too much where it won't produce. That's why we say you need to prune them back as much as you can, because again, if you let it get too much out, now it's just vegetative growth and it won't go into fruiting.
Yeah.
I think you answered my question, because I had a problem with that where I had more vegetative growth than I had the fruits.
Right.
But what I had done is I was told I pruned it back at the wrong time of the moon cycle. So I pruned it back too early or whatever,
Right.
and I had more growth.
Right.
So was that my issue? I did not cut it back
And
enough?
I think so. That's
thought I
probably what
did.
it was, is not cutting it back enough, because that's what'll happen is because then it has the energy to be able to produce leaves, vegetative growth, but then that's a whole nother thing of what a plant needs, just like humans, that's a whole nother growth when we're talking about fruiting.
So think of it in the human body. All right. So when we get cold, hypothermia, your body starts shutting down those extremities to protect the core. So when something's not right, when things are off balance, this grapevine is going to say, well, I'm not going to produce any fruit. I need to produce leaves to get the sunlight, to get the nutrients that I need from the air and the sun and everything to protect my core. But when everything's in balance, when everything's done right, then it starts producing the fruit that you need. So the fruit is to produce other little small grapevines. When you're in danger, when your core is in danger, your head's not in talking about reproduction. It's talking about how to survive. And it's the same thing with a grapevine. Plants is pretty much the same way, any plant really.
So, and the moon doesn't have, it does play a factor in after you prune, when you prune.
So that's just in the sap run.
Okay.
So a stronger
Okay.
moon, a fuller moon, it's
more
going to
I
pull
got-
on that sap and it's going to
Exactly.
rise
Yep.
a whole lot more. So moon phase, yeah, it has something to do with it too. But I always go off of temperature, not so much the moon phase. If you get the temperature just right, you'll find. But you can definitely plant with the moon and stuff like that too, for sure. Yeah.
I want to say too, I appreciate your point about February pruning, because don't forget, people in Raleigh, we used to be in zone 7.
Yeah.
Right.
Now we're zone 8.
Right.
So there's an increasing chance that if you try to do your pruning after Christmas,
Exactly.
or even New Year's, you may not be waiting
Yep.
late enough.
Yep. And see,
Like
climate
it's-
change is real. You know, your people down in Georgia's having an issue growing peaches. You know, before long, the peach is not going to be the Georgia state motto thing.
North Carolina steady having problems with apples
Yeah.
for the same reason.
So everything's kind of, you got the heat, it's getting warmer, you know what I'm saying? So you got all those issues and stuff. So eventually we're going to be the producer of peaches. North Carolina is going to be producer of peaches instead of Georgia if things keep, you know, going the way it's going. So yeah, it's, you know, and go off of your temperatures. Like I said, if you're having a very warm fall or unseasonably warm winter or whatever, you want to try to wait a little bit later. If you're, you know, if it's bitterly cold for 3-4 weeks in December, you might be able to get away with doing something in January. Just depends on, you know, like I said, the temperature. So,
All right. I think we're good. We're holding everybody up from lunch. We
yeah,
don't want
sorry
them
about
coming
that.
after us. So I think we're good. Thank you, guys.